innovation over regulation should not mean that you have a free pass to do whatever you want and in a way violate the other laws, the existing laws, maybe the more general laws that exist in India, right? Or do something that's just not that in a way against public policy or whatever, right? What businesses should understand is that while it's right now the way the government is looking at AI is innovation over regulation, you have to still build in a way that you're building with trust. I think the most important aspect is to build trust and ensure that your users are able to rely on the product that you're creating. There's some accountability, right? So from that perspective, what we always tell clients, while there is no specific law right now that's regulating AI, it's always good to build with certain principles in mind, right? For instance, have certain basic safeguards, have certain basic values as a business. For instance, this is the type of, if it's a Gen AI business, right, this is the type of content we are not going to sort of allow that the platform will create.
Hello everyone, welcome to a very special episode of Security Chips. AI at this point of time is not just a simple buzzword, it's so much more and a part of our day-to-day lives. Joining us here today to talk about AI more extensively is Aparna Gaur, who is a partner at Trace Law Partners and a technology, media, and intellectual property lawyer with over a decade of experience advising clients on complex and regulatory issues. Before she started her own law firm, Aparna worked with the country's leading law firms and advised some of the world's biggest tech companies. Aparna has also been recognized by Legal 500 as a rising star for TMT in the past. In this conversation, we'll explore some legal and policy questions shaping AI and what this means not just for companies that are building in India, but also for the country looking outward. I started my career at DSCI talking about AI and its impact on the internet. And funnily enough, I'm here talking about AI again with the person I met the first time when I was talking about AI. Hi Aparna, welcome to our podcast.
Hi,
and it's great to have you here. So as you know, we'll be talking about the legal and regulatory aspects of AI in India today. We're talking about the AI summit, the SGI amendment. There were AI governance guidelines which came out. So it's more than a buzzword at this point of time. It's becoming a very important part of tech policy as we see it today. So let's jump right in. And I'll start with how there's a lot of excitement around India's AI approach at this point of time. And there's this one phrase we keep hearing again and again, which is innovation over restraint. It, from someone who's not in the policy space, it sounds very fancy. It sounds great. But say I'm a startup founder who's working on an AI product in Bangalore. What would this mean to me as a founder working on this product, and what am I supposed to do?
Right. So I think what's important to understand is innovation over regulation should not mean that you have a free pass to do whatever you want and in a way violate the other laws, the existing laws, maybe the more general laws that exist in India, right? Or do something that's just not that in a way against public policy or whatever, right? What businesses should understand is that while it's right now the way the government is looking at AI is innovation over regulation, you have to still build in a way that you're building with trust. I think the most important aspect is to build trust and ensure that your users are able to rely on the product that you're creating. There's some accountability, right? So from that perspective, what we always tell clients, while there is no specific law right now that's regulating AI, it's always good to build with certain principles in mind, right? For instance, have certain basic safeguards, have certain basic values as a business. For instance, this is the type of, if it's a Gen AI business, right, this is the type of content we are not going to sort of allow that the platform will create, something like that.
Right.
Now, if we look at the AI, the document, the policy document that came out also, it does talk about several other things that businesses should do, right? One of the things was that try to comply to certain voluntary norms. Maybe as we've seen now, certain other industries, wherever there's self-regulation, the governments are do not then tend to over-regulate in those areas, because the government does feel that this is being self-regulated, right? So I do think if that's something that can happen, maybe some industry standards can develop, and anyone who's starting to build an AI platform, or just any sort of AI startup, can just comply with those basic frameworks that you should be there, right? And generally similar to what the government has generally been talking about, right? Open, safe, accountable internet, something like that, right? Is what we always tell the client. There's also another aspect why this it's very important, which we're seeing now with the DPDPA, right? Now there are companies who've been collecting data since years, they haven't been complying, and now there's this law, and suddenly everyone is really struggling to comply now because you haven't been complying since many years, because your foundations were not built on privacy by design or something. So in a way, if you're as an AI model, if you're building with some principles, I think it'll just be easier if at all someday there is some regulation, you are already on the path of compliance, which will be helpful.
Right. So you talked about how AI doesn't exist in isolation in today's environment, right? So when you look at the broader legal ecosystem, be it about data protection, IT rules, you have various sectoral regulations. How do you see them coexist in today's environment? Or do you think that's not possible and we're probably looking at a very awkward situation between founders, creators, and regulatory authorities as well as the law?
I think that I do think maybe some people will look at it that as legal hurdles, that okay, there are while there is innovation and you can freely innovate, some of these laws in a way create a hurdle to your growth. But I feel that it's important to have these checks and balances. For instance, the DPDP Act now, right? Obviously, there is a possibility of training AI models using personal data, but you don't want to allow that. Sometimes people are sharing personal data without even knowing that personal data is being shared, and so on, right? So there need to be these guardrails. Now, the other aspect is obviously copyright. In terms of, obviously, there's a lot of discussion happening around whether training using third-party materials and copyrighted works for training amounts to infringement and whatnot. Now the DPIIT has proposed that we should have a hybrid licensing sort of model where it's going to be any works which are lawfully accessed should be available to innovators, so long as they are paying certain royalties. To my mind, my hot take on the DPIIT paper is that it's not, you can't look at all types of innovation in the same way. I understand that innovation is important in certain areas. For instance, it's important maybe in healthcare, maybe climate change, agriculture, and so on, where innovation can be given a higher standard versus certain other rights, right? But where we're talking about art, folk music, culture, and so on, and you're saying even these types of works will be freely accessible because we have to now promote innovation in terms of AI, I don't agree with that. So I do think that this hurdle of copyright, in a way, they're trying to deal with this through this framework of hybrid licensing, but the hybrid model. But we have to understand that there has to be a balance between innovation versus other rights. And I do think that there are areas where innovation is important, but there are areas where maybe you don't need AI, where you don't need to give a preference to AI over certain other types of things that are happening, and so in a way hamper other forms of art or culture and so on. So
this is actually quite interesting because this is a debate that we've been hearing. In fact, there was something I'd read in an article about this, about how AI sort of is taking away that aspect of enjoying art, whether it's something that's been created, like it's a picture or a video, or even something like reading an article or a book. I mean, it takes away from the fact when you're just putting the book on, say, any generative AI model and asking you to summarize it. That experience sort of is taken away from you. And I think we should definitely discuss that. But sticking to what you said, coming back to about personal data and the DPDP framework now being operationalized sometime in November, which was around the time when the AI governance guidelines also came out. In a way, when we see it, from my understanding at least, that it's creating a sort of contradictory sense in that way, where the DPDP is emphasizing on things like consent management, data minimization, purpose based data processing, while the guidelines talk about you should encourage experimentation. Say you have a client who's looking to navigate both in that sense, where you have to comply with the law as well as trying to develop a new AI product. Where do you feel that they tend to feel the most uncertain in that sense?
Right. I mean, see, from a DPDPA perspective, one thing that we need to keep in mind is it's only dealing with personal data.
Right.
And also, it exempts from applicability any personal data that's publicly available. Now, obviously, the question remains what is publicly available, because obviously there are questions around if it's on my personal social media profile, which is a private profile, which I'm not sharing with the world, is that publicly available and so on, right? While those questions exist, the first thing is just to what I'm trying to say is, principally it looks like, oh, these two laws are in a way the law creates a hurdle to innovation. But it comes back I think I would come back to the same point that I made earlier. It's about innovation versus protecting these rights, which are very important. So for most AI models, is there a possibility to train without using personal data, right? I was speaking to someone today morning and they were telling me that they have an app which will help businesses segregate personal data versus non-personal data.
Okay,
So it
that's
seems,
interesting.
yeah, it seems there is a possibility to, when you're storing data, to do that. Maybe for AI models, it is possible to ensure that you're either anonymizing data before training, or you're just it's sort of only using publicly available information, and then DPDPA is not a concern for you at all. If DPDPA, obviously, if you for some reason need to train using personal data, then we have that exemption under the law for research also, which the understanding earlier, when the draft law came out and the rules were not out, everyone thought that that's going to be limited to research by the government, but that has not happened. Obviously, then again, there are issues there. I mean, not issues, but certain things that you need to be mindful of is one is that you're not using that research, to make an assessment about that individual. And so there's some language in the law about that, right? Which I think should be possible for AI models. So I do think there is enough leeway under the DPDPA also. But if you're specifically dealing with someone's personal data, then yes, you will need to comply with the consent requirements and so on. So yeah.
So from, say, someone who's not from the law background, how would you go about giving that sort of advice to them? That, and if you feel there are some other non-negotiables which should be taken into consideration when you're looking to develop AI in a manner that is sort of regulated and ethical in that manner. So what are some things you as a lawyer would suggest to a client in this situation?
So we always look at, one is definitely DPDPA, like you're saying. The other aspects are even the general laws, right? Now there are laws around, what I'm trying to say is content regulation. While again, the question remains for AI platforms, whether they're an intermediary or not, and who's liable, who should be liable, and so on. That sort of remains open as a question. But you have to be mindful of laws around obscenity, laws around defamation, and so on. Defamation, I don't know if it's possible to control that level of a filter. But, CSAM, again, is a very, very important aspect that you need to be mindful of. If you're creating a GenAI platform, just as a value, you should have filters that prevent creation of such content, because that's just a harm to the public in general. So we do, and we do this even for non-AI platforms. Even when, so we work with a lot of OTT platforms, for instance, who are now setting up. So, some of my clients are setting up OTT platforms. So we do give them a do's and don'ts on, these are things you should just not do. This is the type of content you should just not be posting on your, uploading on your platform, right? So similarly, AI platforms also should think of some guardrails, is what we always tell them. And maybe, and it's good for them to have these sort of, what are definitely things you should not do, and what are things, for instance, IP infringement again remains a gray area in terms of what you're creating, whether it could infringe something else or not. These are gray areas. Everyone knows that. But certain things you should definitely be mindful of, is what we always tell clients, that these XYZ things are must do's for you.
That way, that makes sense to have like very clear demarcations
Yeah.
of do's and don'ts. It makes sense all the time. And it is something which I feel should be adopted as a practice overall.
Yeah.
Moving from the domestic sense to say an international sense. Say, again, I'll give the example. I was the founder sitting in Bangalore. One fine day I decide, okay, I want to scale and move to the EU.
Yeah.
Given that they've been using India's sort of light touch approach, what changes do you think they would have to encounter when they move to the EU in terms of regulatory comparisons, in terms of legal comparisons? Is there going to be a very big shock in that sense when they move to the EU, to showcase their platform over there?
Right. So we do have the EU AI Act, which applies in the EU. And you're right. Basically, when you're in India and you're in a space that's not really regulated technically,
Right.
and then you decide to move maybe abroad, especially to the EU, then there is definitely an assessment that needs to be done in terms of what are your compliances when the EU AI Act comes into picture, right? So there are issues around, if your AI model is high risk,
Right.
then there's a higher level of compliances and so on. I think one more aspect, which I didn't touch upon earlier, is this entire thing about, and again, this is recently we were negotiating a contract on behalf of my client, who was an AI developer. They have an AI platform, and they for content creation, and then he said to the other party that, listen, I am not responsible for IP infringement, for the reason that I am only using foundational models and building on that, right? So that's the other thing that, maybe I should have said that in the earlier answers, that as a founder, when you're building on a foundational model, you should still be able to have certain guardrails, is what I feel.
Yes.
Again, legally right now, regulatory, there's nothing that requires you to have that, but other than the general laws that we have. But I do think saying that I am not responsible, but the foundational models are responsible, I don't know if this will work. And it does not work in the EU also, because EU AI Act does have specific obligations, I believe, on deployers versus providers and so on. I mean, I'm not an expert on EU law, but I do think there's a segregation on whether you're providing a foundational model, and if you're developing on that, and what are your obligations there as well. So yeah, I think the advice, basically, just to summarize, would be, if you're planning to scale this globally,
Yes.
then build with that, with that in mind. From the beginning, you should have that mindset. Ideally, sometimes obviously you cannot plan, but try to have that mindset from the beginning, so you know what are the risks of, abroad, that and the maybe the issues abroad that you may face. The issue, obviously, practically, that comes there is, you have to engage a lawyer in the EU, and a lot of businesses don't want to do that till they really need to do that.
Right.
So that's the practical challenge that we see most of the times.
So again, for our non-legal audience, could you give some examples of what would be high risk under the EU AI Act?
My understanding is that anything that significantly impacts users, or if there's data, I think, that's flowing out of the country, is probably high risk. But again, it's been a while since I saw the law, so I could be wrong. So, yeah.
If you have any answers to what high risk could be, please do leave your answers in the comments. Again, a slightly controversial question stays between you, me, and everyone else in the room, and our entire audience who will probably be listening. When say an AI product is to be launched in the market, at what stage, again, this will be what it should ideally be and what the answer is in reality.
Yeah.
At what stage is the legal or a policy team involved in this? Is it from the very beginning? Is it when the product is just about to be launched in the market?
Yeah.
Is it somewhere in between? What ideally, when should a legal and policy team or two separate legal and policy teams look into the regulation of AI?
Yeah.
Is it at the beginning? Is it at the end? And when in reality does that happen in our current
Right.
times?
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is, as a tech lawyer, this is an answer I'd give generally as a tech lawyer, not just an AI lawyer, because what happens is, because in a way we have product counsel, so we work with clients when they're building a product. A lot of times, and it's different. The approach is different for different companies depending on what's their vision for the company, right? So I'll tell you an example. Obviously, if it's a major tech company, lawyers and like us are involved from the very beginning, right? So we will be given actual images of the product. Sometimes we're actually given the entire user journey to see what's happening, and at each stage we can tell the client that, okay, this is looking problematic, this could be a problem, and so on, right? And then the client is building the product and changing the product with the legal advice. Sometimes they hate it, obviously, because a lot of times, their product teams versus us. The product teams obviously want to do what they want to do in terms of design and everything, but then, especially if it's a B2C product, right? A lot of times what happens is we have to be mindful of consumer protection issues. So even very soft aspects that could become a dark pattern and so on. So we're advising on a lot of those things. So yeah, bigger companies definitely from a very early stage. Now, what I've seen with startups is that, for instance, right now I have a client, one of these clients who's building an OTT platform. Their vision is definitely that we will have investors coming in very soon. So what I've seen with those types of startups is that they also, from the very beginning, they want to be compliant. So we've already given them lists of do's and don'ts. I have full visibility of where their app is in terms of what stage of building it is at. So I know at what stage I need to tell them that, okay, now show me your user journey so that I can tell you from a DPDPA perspective if this is fine or not. And then there are obviously still clients who will come to you maybe after something has gone wrong, or just before launch of a product, or after launch, after some law has come in, and only then, right? So we've seen a full spectrum. Ideally, it should be before. You should reach out to lawyers at the time of building, so you're able to build, in a compliant manner. Build these guardrails, which are technically not law, I guess, in India, but keeping in mind the general Indian laws, you could build something that could, through which you will avoid, legal hurdles.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And I hope everyone listens to this and does pay heed to it. So before we started recording, you and I talked about respective times at the Delhi High Court and our experiences with the IP, me with the IP division and you with IP in general at the High Court. So again, I think the last couple of years, especially when I was working at the Delhi High Court, was when there was a start of cases regarding deepfakes and personality rights.
Yeah.
And we've seen that just like take over the roster in that sense, in terms of, I think, everyone reaching either the Delhi or the Bombay High Court regarding the protection of their personality rights vis-a-vis deepfakes. What you talked about earlier, there is an issue. There are several cases also pending in terms of copyright infringement for training LLMs and the distinction between fair use and copyright infringement overall. So, in your opinion, do you think we as a legal system are ready, or do we still have some catching up to do?
I think some courts in India, especially the courts that probably have these specialized IP divisions, are probably ready. I know that the ANI versus OpenAI case that's going on right now, the court has appointed 2 lawyers who are, just to give their views on the issue, right? So, in a way, I think we are well equipped to handle these issues. from a legal perspective, some courts. I think, yeah. I mean, again, Delhi High Court is very close to my heart.
It's very close to my heart too. Shout out to the Delhi High Court cold coffee.
Yes,
If you
and the
know, you know.
samosas.
It's some of the best coffee we've ever had.
Yeah, I'm not even a coffee drinker, but I used to drink that
I
sometimes.
love it,
And
yeah.
then entire day I used to be anxious because I get anxiety.
One
because of
cold
caffeine.
coffee.
So yeah. But yeah, I do think. I think we are there. We should. It should be okay.
We'll be fine,
Yeah.
is what you're trying to
Yes.
say.
Yeah.
We'll be fine, which is a great thing to hear from someone as great as Aparna. So, I'm sure you must be having a lot of. I think we'll now shift gears a little towards where whether people sitting in offices in central Delhi, what they should be thinking about, what they're thinking about in terms of India and its geopolitics in terms of AI. So, if you have conversations with, say, clients or peers, not just in India but internationally as well, how is this stance which India has taken regarding AI perceived? Are we seen as pragmatic? Is it seen as experimental? Is it ambitious? Any other similar adjectives? What is the general consensus that you seem to be hearing about India's current AI stance?
I think based on my discussions, and mostly it's with, foreign law firms, some foreign clients, in a way it's welcome right now that there is no there is, the focus is on innovation. But what I do see is that there is with India, especially in the technology domain, there is always this fear due to the regulatory uncertainty that we
Right.
have, right? Because what happens is a lot of times we hear things that, okay, this is going to be regulated, this is going to be regulated, and we don't know. A lot of times we don't know what's going to happen. Now, even with this HDI amendments, there are certain aspects that have come in which were not in the draft rules, which is
Right.
obviously only natural for it to happen. But some of it is quite onerous. Some of the, the takedown obligations and so on, right? So that's where I think there's a little bit of fear always that there is this regulatory uncertainty in India. But yeah, overall, the sense that I get is that it's good that there is no regulation that we know of right
Yeah.
now, right? Yeah. So
And we do see India taking an active stance.
Yes.
Like our last question for the day, actually not the last, this is the last question, and then I'm gonna ask you something fun. So personally, if you feel you must have seen the budget, there have been slashes in India AI missions allocation. There have been allocations across for the data protection board, there have been allocations for India, the new semicon mission. So according to you, if India wants to be positioned as a very prominent leader globally in terms of AI, what do you think there's one aspect that they need to get absolutely right? Is it compute? Is it institutional capacity? Is it regulatory norms? Is it talent? Where should our priorities lie essentially?
I think maybe talent and infrastructure, and thirdly, building trust.
Right.
I think I started with trust and maybe I will end with trust, because I think we do know there is talent in India, right? From a even, deep tech and everything perspective, right? But is there enough infrastructure and support for it to grow and reach a global scale? Maybe that's where we need to, and how do we do that? Is what I think the government is already thinking about
They are thinking about that, yes.
these policy papers. Now we have the AI summit and everything. But I think those, and like I said, trust, in terms of that is more from the perspective of, when I say trust, I feel like that's more from a user perspective that I
Right.
say that, you need to build trust so that Indian technology can be seen at the same level, maybe as, trust and accountability as maybe some of the multinationals that we have. So yeah, that's probably what I would say.
That was all quite informative. And now to move to something fun. Short rapid fire, essentially. There's no hamper. What is the one probably like tech-based book or movie or show that you would recommend that everyone should watch?
Funnily, I don't watch a lot of or consume a lot of tech based content, unfortunately. Yeah. So I wouldn't I don't know. The last tech sort of show that I watched was Black Mirror. That was a long time back.
Right.
So yeah, I feel like I my tech uh,
Separating work and content
yeah.
consumption. That's great.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Aparna, for taking our time and coming with us for this episode of Security Chips. It was great talking to you, and I hope that we continue to have more such conversations with you and overall with a lot of people in the next coming episodes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
you.